Beloved, for thousands of years the world has looked upon miracles as though they were exceptions to law, as though heaven breaks its own order from time to time to intervene in the affairs of a fortunate few. And so humanity waits, hoping that perhaps God will choose this moment, this circumstance, this sickness, this fear, and bless it with a special act of mercy. But I say to you, God has no favorites. God withholds nothing. God does not reach down from some far-off realm to choose one and ignore another. What we call a miracle is never the violation of law. It is the natural revealing of spiritual law, the law that has existed from eternity but has remained hidden only because we have looked everywhere except where it actually is in consciousness. The world believes that Jesus healed because he possessed a supernatural power unavailable to ordinary men. Churches teach it, religion reinforces it, the mind accepts it, and generations surrender their spiritual birthright as a result. But that is not what the Master taught, nor is it what he demonstrated. I can of mine own self do nothing, he said. Nothing. Not one healing, not one revelation, not one miracle. If he, the greatest spiritual light the world has known, could do nothing of himself, then surely the healing power is not personal, it is impersonal, universal, and infinitely available to all who understand its law. Miracles seem mysterious only because we approach them from the standpoint of matter, body, circumstance, and time. We believe the outer world is cause and consciousness is effect. We believe a power outside must change the conditions inside. We believe something in the visible has to shift before peace, health, or harmony can appear. This is the great misunderstanding. Every so-called miracle is simply the moment when the inner truth pierces the veil of appearance. Healing is not something God suddenly decides to do. Healing is the revealing of a wholeness that has never been absent. Supply is not something injected into your life. Supply is the appearing of the boundless fullness that has always been the substance of your being. Harmony is not restored, it is recognized. And so, my friends, we must begin here with this single foundational recognition. There is no miracle in truth. There is only the lifting of the veil that hides truth from our present awareness. The world has been taught to look outward to methods, to formulas, to rituals, to personalities. But the Master did not look outward. When confronted with lack, he did not work with loaves and fishes. When confronted with disease, he did not work with the body. When confronted with death, he did not work with dust. He lifted his eyes. He turned within. He acknowledged the presence. For him, the miracle took place. The instant consciousness shifted. The outer was merely the echo of that shift. He healed through recognition, not manipulation. Through oneness, not effort. Through awareness, not intervention. This is the hidden truth humanity has missed. A miracle is not God changing your experience. A miracle is you awakening to what God already is. And so, as we embark on this journey together, let us release the old concepts of divine interference, divine favoritism, divine exception. Let us lay aside the belief that God must be persuaded, convinced, or petitioned. Let us open ourselves to the possibility that the miracle you have sought for years is not waiting to be granted, it is waiting to be seen. We begin by acknowledging that all true healing is an activity of the Christ within, never the effort of the human mind. We begin by recognizing that what appears to you as a problem is not a power, not a presence, not a law, it is merely a mistaken perception. And we begin by understanding that the law behind every miracle is the law of one presence, one power, one life. As this awareness unfolds in us, gently, silently, naturally, the so-called miracles of Scripture become the ordinary events of a life lived in spiritual consciousness. Not through magic, not through force, but through recognizing what already is. Let this be the foundation upon which we build. Miracles are not reserved for saints. Miracles are not reserved for masters. Miracles are the natural outcome of awakened consciousness. They belong to you because the presence that performed them then is the presence living as you now. And so we begin, beloved, once the mind releases its old belief that miracles are exceptions, it must next confront the question, if miracles are not exceptions, then what is the law that makes them possible? And here we touch the very heart of spiritual revelation, the truth that stands behind every healing Jesus performed, every restoration in Scripture, every demonstration in mystical history. There is only one presence. There is only one power. There is only one life. This is the foundation of all spiritual healing, the basis of all spiritual demonstration, and the secret behind every miracle that has ever appeared on this earth. Everything else is but the shadow of human belief. Look out upon the world, and you will see a vast theater of opposites, good and evil, health and sickness, wealth and poverty, joy and sorrow. You will see conflict between nations, conflict between individuals, conflict within yourself, and the world will say, these are real powers. These forces struggle against each other. They are equal in strength, and you must choose the side of good to defeat the side of evil. But this is not truth. This is the belief in two powers, and it is the source of all fear. As long as you accept two powers, you will seek to use one to overcome the other. You will pray to God to conquer disease. You will beg for divine help to conquer lack. You will ask for spiritual intervention to conquer discord. But every such request is proof that you still believe the appearance has power, that something besides God exists and must be fought. This is the hypnotism of the human mind. Jesus never fought. He never resisted. He never struggled with conditions. He never waged war against disease. He never tried to overpower darkness with light. Why? Because in his consciousness there was nothing to oppose. He saw only one present spirit, one power God, one life infinite being. He knew no opposite power existed. Therefore he could say, resist not evil, because in the presence of one power, evil has nothing to resist. This is the law. Where the world sees sickness, he saw only the life of God expressing. Where the world sees lack, he saw only infinite supply manifesting. Where the world sees sin, he saw the purity of the Father reflected in his child, and because his consciousness held no belief in a second power, the appearance of that second power dissolves. You cannot hold two powers in thought and expect harmony. You cannot believe both in God and in the power of disease. You cannot believe both in spirit and in the power of matter. You cannot believe both in divine supply and in the power of lack. If you do, you split your consciousness, and a split consciousness cannot behold the fullness of truth. The secret behind every miracle is this. In spiritual reality, there are no opposing forces. God is one, indivisible, undivided, uninterrupted. The moment consciousness realizes this oneness, even for an instant, what the world calls miracle appears. A miracle is not created, it is released, not brought into being, revealed, not constructed, uncovered. All because one power was acknowledged where two were believed. And so, my friends, healing is never a matter of conquering an illness. It is the recognition that illness has no law to support it. Supply is never a matter of acquiring more. It is the recognition that infinite abundance is the very nature of your being. Harmony is never achieved by arranging human relationships. It is realized through the acknowledgement that one mind is the life of every individual. Miracles are the natural outcome of this recognition. Goldsmith repeated it endlessly because humanity forgets it endlessly. God is the only power. There is no other. This is not a metaphor. It is not a poetic sentiment. It is not an optimistic viewpoint. It is the law that governs all existence. To know God as one power is to dissolve the belief in the second, the belief in the appearance, the belief in the problem, the belief in the threat. And the moment the belief in two powers is surrendered, your entire universe shifts. You will see that the things which once frightened you have no power at all. You will see that the conditions which once enslaved you cannot touch your being. You will see that the forces which once appeared overwhelming were only phantoms of the mind. One presence, one power, one life. This is the bedrock of spiritual realization. This is the law behind every miracle Jesus performed. This is the principle behind every healing in the infinite way. And when this truth takes root in your consciousness, even faintly, you stand at the doorway of liberation. Now, beloved, once we see that there is only one presence and one power, we must face a question the human mind struggles to accept. If God is the only power, then what is this thing we call sickness? What is lack? What is fear? What is discord? What is evil? To the human sense, these seem overwhelmingly real. They appear in the body, in the bank account, in relationships, in world affairs. They demand attention, they frighten, they insist upon their presence, and yet, even as they shout, they remain at their core nothingness. This, more than any other principle, startled Goldsmith's students. Again and again he taught, error has no entity, no law, no substance, no power. It is not a thing. You cannot fight a thing that has no existence. You cannot overcome a shadow. You cannot heal an illusion. You can only awaken from it. Dear ones, error is not an entity. It is a belief in an entity. It is not a spiritual reality. It is only the misperception arising from material sense. The world has taught you to give weight, power, and substance to appearances. But appearances are not realities. Appearances are only pictures in mind, interpretations of the senses, projections of fear and separation. Sickness, in and of itself, is not a spiritual condition. It is the mind's interpretation of a sensory experience. Lack, in and of itself, is not a reality. It is a belief arising from the false premise that supply has its source in matter. Discord, in and of itself, is not a force. It is a temporary manifestation of the belief in separation. These conditions are not supported by God. They are not sustained by divine law. They have no cause, no substance, and no continuity except the belief we pour into them. The Master understood this perfectly. When the world cried, "She is dead," he replied, "The girl is not dead, but sleeps." Why? Because he saw beyond the appearance to the reality, the spiritual fact unaltered by human perception. The appearance said death, but there is no death in God. The appearance said lack, but there is no lack in spirit. The appearance said incurable, but nothing in the infinite is incurable. Jesus did not heal by manipulating matter. He healed by seeing through the illusion. He healed by recognizing the nothingness of error and the allness of God. This is why he could look upon a blind man and say, "Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents." He removed the false premise. He denied the belief that error had cause. And once the false premise is removed, the appearance collapses. The human mind asks, but if error is nothing, why does it feel so real? because you are reacting not to the error itself, but to your belief in it. A dream feels real until you awaken. Fear feels real until you see there is nothing to fear. Illusion feels real until consciousness reveals its emptiness. Do not attempt to heal the illusion. Do not attempt to improve the mirage. Do not attempt to change the shadow. Simply recognize that a shadow has no substance and it disappears. Goldsmith would often say, a problem is not something to be solved, but something to be dissolved. And how is it dissolved? By realizing it never had reality in God. By recognizing that whatever is not formed of God is not formed at all. By understanding that no appearance, no matter how threatening, can stand in the presence of Christ consciousness. This is why spiritual healing begins with stillness. In stillness, the mind stops projecting power into the appearance. In stillness, the hypnotic spell of fear is broken. In stillness, the truth of oneness reveals itself. And when truth is seen, error naturally dissolves, because the truth has no opposite. You may look at your body and see pain. You may look at your finances and see lack. You may look at your relationships and see conflict. But what you are seeing is not spiritual reality, it is the picture the human mind has painted upon the screen of awareness. When you withdraw belief from that picture, it fades. When you no longer grant it power, it cannot act. When you see it as appearance and not reality, it loses its foundation. The nothingness of error is not a statement of denial, it is a statement of spiritual fact. We are not denying the appearance, we are denying its reality. We are not ignoring the picture, we are refusing to give it divine authority. We are not pretending the condition is harmless. We are recognizing it has no law to sustain it. This, dear ones, is the reason miracles occur without effort. The miracle is not the overcoming of something real, it is the disappearance of something unreal. When consciousness awakens to truth, the illusion simply cannot maintain its form. The entire weight of your spiritual journey rests on this understanding. Nothing unlike God has reality, power, presence, or law. Recognize this, even faintly, and you will witness the dissolving of what the world calls problems. They were never real. They were only believed. And belief, once withdrawn, reveals the infinite perfection that has been present all along. Beloved, once we understand the nothingness of error, we arrive naturally at the great pivot upon which all spiritual healing turns. Consciousness is cause. Not sometimes, not occasionally, not when God decides. Always, universally, inevitably. And because consciousness is cause, it follows with equal certainty that matter is never cause. Matter is only effect, the outer shadow, the visible form taken by whatever state of consciousness we entertain. Humanity reverses this order and suffers for it. Humanity believes that the body creates health or sickness, that money produces abundance or lack, that people bring harmony or discord, that circumstances push us into joy or fear. Humanity lives utterly convinced that the outer world is the cause of inner experience. But, dear ones, this is the hypnotism of material sense. This is the dream from which the spiritual seeker must awaken. The Master taught the opposite. Goldsmith taught the opposite. Every mystic has discovered the opposite. Nothing external is cause, and nothing internal is effect. The within is the essence. The without is only the echo. Jesus never attempted to change matter. He never worked with the body. He never manipulated external conditions. He knew that the body is but the picture the mind holds, and the picture can only change as the mind changes. He knew that conditions are but the shadow cast by consciousness, and no one in all the ages has ever changed a shadow by touching the shadow. You cannot cure darkness by working with darkness. You cannot correct a reflection by polishing the mirror. You cannot transform the outer by beginning with the outer. Healing begins where the Christ realized begins, in consciousness. Every miracle in Scripture is preceded by a moment of inner turning. He lifted his eyes. He went into the mountain to pray. He withdrew himself. These descriptions are not geographical, they are mystical. They represent the Master's movement inward, away from the hypnotism of the senses, away from the appearance of two powers, into the awareness of one presence. And when consciousness aligned with truth, the effect, what you call the outer world, responded instantly, naturally, inevitably, not through manipulation, not through effort, not through force, but because the shadow cannot help but follow the light that casts it. So let us be clear. If consciousness is cause, then harmony in consciousness must appear as harmony in experience. If consciousness is cause, then peace in consciousness must appear as peace in circumstance. If consciousness is cause, then the recognition of God as the only life must appear as health in the body. The world says, show me the change on the outside and then I will believe. Spirit says, believe only in the truth within, and the outside will reveal what you have known. Goldsmith reminded us repeatedly, change your consciousness and you change your universe. Not the universe. Your experience of being. This is why spiritual healing cannot be achieved through physical means. It cannot be achieved by manipulating flesh, adjusting thought in order to condition matter, nor by trying to bend the external world to your preferences. It can only be achieved by realizing the truth of being and allowing the outer picture to conform to that realization. Matter is not stubborn. Consciousness is simply asleep. Matter is not powerful. Belief is simply strong. Matter does not resist. The mind clings to false concepts. And the moment consciousness relinquishes its belief in material causation, just the moment the false dependence is dropped, the body responds, the atmosphere clears, the situation shifts. Why? Because the shadow cannot remain when the light changes. We think we are dealing with bodies and conditions, but we are always dealing with states of consciousness. Your world is not happening to you, it is happening through you. Your experience is not a collection of accidents. It is the unfolding of whatever you are accepting as reality. But take heart, this is not a burden. This is your liberation. For if consciousness is cause, then the entire universe becomes responsive to the recognition of truth. The moment you turn within and acknowledge the infinite presence as the only reality, you have already stepped into the domain where miracles become natural. You no longer fear the body, because you know the body is only the sequence of consciousness. You no longer fear lack, because supply is the activity of consciousness, not the movement of money. You no longer fear discord, because harmony is the nature of the one mind expressing as your awareness. Everything begins within. Everything begins in consciousness. Everything begins with the recognition that spirit alone is cause, and the visible world, so impressive, so intimidating, so convincing, is only the passing shadow of your inner knowing. Therefore, beloved, do not waste your years trying to rearrange shadows. Do not devote your efforts to correcting what is already in effect. Do not attempt to heal matter. Matter has no selfhood to heal. Turn within. Recognize the truth. Rest in the awareness that God alone is the source and activity of your being. And your outer world will shape itself quietly and beautifully to the truth your consciousness has accepted. This is the law behind every miracle. Beloved, having seen that consciousness is the only cause and that matter is but the shadow of that consciousness, we must now enter into the heart of spiritual practice, the very core of all healing, all demonstration, all transformation. And that core is this simple, profound principle. We do not treat. We recognize almost all of humanity engages in treatment, attempting to fix, repair, correct, remove, or improve some condition or problem. And yet in doing so, they unknowingly affirm the one thing that prevents healing, the belief that the problem has power. When you treat a sickness, you declare sickness to be a force that must be overcome. When you affirm abundance to counter lack, you affirm lack as a power that must be conquered. When you pray for harmony amid discord, you affirm discord as a presence capable of disturbing reality. This is what Goldsmith called seeking second, placing the material appearance first, and the truth of being second. And as long as you treat a problem, you testify to its reality. As long as you fight an appearance, you strengthen the hypnotism that formed it. The master never treated. He recognized. He did not say, Father, remove this disease. He said, I know that thou hearest me always. He did not pray for more bread. He recognized the omnipresent fullness of God and broke the loaves. He did not pray for Lazarus to return. He recognized the eternal life of God and called Lazarus forth. In each case, the miracle was not produced by a power acting upon matter. It was released through the recognition of what already is. You see, beloved, truth is never created. Truth is revealed. Healing is never performed. Healing is allowed. Miracles are never manufactured. Miracles are witnessed. Recognition is the realization that God, as infinite being, is already expressing itself as your life whole, complete, untouched by appearance. Recognition is not a technique. It is not the use of truth to change experience. It is the simple, holy awareness of truth as the essence of experience itself. When you recognize the truth of being, the appearance loses its foundation. It has nothing to stand upon. It falls away, not because you pushed it away, but because you withdrew the only substance it ever had, your belief. The moment the mind stops fighting, something extraordinary happens. Spirit begins to reveal itself. Silence becomes active. Peace becomes palpable. Awareness becomes luminous. And the condition that seems so real begins to shift because its supposed reality has been dissolved. If you seek to treat, you meet resistance. If you recognize truth, the appearance melts of its own accord. Consider the difference. To treat is to say, something is wrong. Let us correct it. To recognize is to say, only God is here. What appears as wrong has no reality. To treat is to work in the realm of cause and effect as the world understands it. To recognize is to stand in the realm where God alone is cause and all else is effect. To treat is to engage the mind. To recognize is to silence the mind. To treat is to attempt to use power. To recognize is to rest in the awareness that all power is already present. This is why Goldsmith cautioned his students, do not approach truth as a tool for fixing life. Approach truth as the revelation that life is already whole. Recognition is a form of seeing. It is the inner vision that looks past the appearance and beholds the spiritual fact. It is the consciousness that, when confronted with sickness, perceives only life. When confronted with lack, perceives only infinite supply. When confronted with fear, perceives only the presence of love. And this recognition, this beholding, is the healing. It does not need to be strong. It does not need to be dramatic. It can be as gentle as a feather touching the surface of still water. A brief moment of recognition may accomplish more than hours of treatment. One silent acknowledgement of truth may dissolve years of suffering. A single instant in which the Christ consciousness is felt, however lightly, is enough to begin the entire process of transformation. For the Christ is not a belief. The Christ is not an idea. The Christ is the living presence of God, realized in your awareness. And when the Christ within you recognizes itself, when the divine in you beholds the divine reality, it breaks the hypnotism of the human picture. The false falls away, and the true stands revealed. This is the essence of spiritual healing. Not effort, but awareness. Not struggle, but surrender. Not treatment, but recognition. Let the world treat its problems. Let the world fight its shadows. You are called to a higher way, to the way of the Christ, the way of the infinite, the way of recognition. For in recognition, you return to the truth. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be changed. Nothing needs to be fixed. Only reality needs to be seen. And when it is seen, the miracle is already complete. Beloved, having come this far, having seen the nature of divine law, the nothingness of error, the supremacy of consciousness, and the power of recognition, we now arrive at the sacred heart of the infinite way, the practice of silent realization. All healing flows out of this silence. All miracles unfold out of this presence. All transformation is born in this stillness. Without silence, recognition is incomplete. Without turning inward, truth remains theoretical. Without inner listening, the mind continues to project its illusions upon the screen of experience. For this reason, every great miracle in Scripture begins not with action, not with words, not with effort, but with a pause, a holy pause that opens the soul to the activity of the Spirit. He lifted his eyes. He went apart to pray. He withdrew himself. These phrases do not describe physical movement. They describe a shift in consciousness. The Master turned away from the evidence of the senses, away from the claims of the world, away from the hypnotism of the appearance, and he entered the realm where God alone is. This is where miracles are born. The silent realization is not the attempt to think truth. It is not the repetition of statements. It is not the use of thoughts to silence other thoughts. It is not visualization, affirmation, or mental effort. Silent realization is the resting of consciousness in the awareness of God's presence. This resting is not passive. It is alive with spiritual activity. It is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is not quietude in the human sense. It is the stillness in which the infinite speaks without words. When you enter this silence, you are not trying to change the world. You are not trying to change the body. You are not trying to change conditions. You are allowing the truth to reveal itself, and the truth revealed is always this: I and the Father are one. Where I am, God is. All that the Father is, I am. All that God has is already expressing itself as my life. To sit in this awareness for even a moment is to stand at the doorway of spiritual demonstration. Goldsmith taught that no matter what condition confronts you, physical, financial, emotional, relational, you must first be still and know. And in that stillness, do not seek to alter the appearance. Do not seek to improve the condition. Instead, recognize the presence. Sit quietly, close your eyes if you wish, and acknowledge there is only one life here. There is only one presence here. There is only one power here. This appearance has no law, no cause, no substance. And then be silent. Let the truth dissolve the belief without your assistance. Let the Christ consciousness announce itself. Let the presence reveal what your senses have concealed. In that moment of stillness, the mind relaxes, fear loosens its grip, and the spiritual atmosphere is cleared. The illusion begins to dissolve, not because you have fought it, but because you have stopped sustaining it. Do not be concerned if your mind is noisy at first. Do not be troubled if the appearance seems unchanged. Do not judge the depth of your silence or the quality of your meditation. The human mind knows nothing of spiritual things. Its judgments are worthless. Its expectations are illusions. Its anxieties are shadows. Your task is not to perfect the silence. Your task is simply to enter it. Grace does the rest. The presence performs its own work. The Christ within completes what you cannot begin. In this silence, you are not trying to reach God. You are recognizing that God is already where you are. You are not trying to invite the infinite into your life. You are realizing that your life is already within the infinite. This silence is the womb of miracles. For the moment consciousness touches the presence, even lightly, even briefly, the hypnotic power of the appearance weakens, the shadow trembles, and the truth begins to shine through. And once the truth shines through, no appearance can stand before it. Silent realization is not a method, it is the atmosphere in which truth reveals itself. It is not a practice to obtain something, it is the recognition that all is already given. It is not a path to reach God, it is the awareness that God is the only reality. And as you return to this silence, gently, frequently, without struggle, you will begin to feel a subtle shift within you, a new center, a deeper peace, a quiet certainty that is not of this world. This is the dawning of the Christ within you. This is the beginning of spiritual vision. This is the consciousness from which miracles flow naturally without effort. For once consciousness is aligned with truth, the outer world has no choice but to reflect that truth. As within, so without. As consciousness, so experience. As God, so the expression of God. This is how miracles are born. This is where healing begins. This is the essence of the infinite way. Beloved, principles mean nothing until demonstrated. Truth remains theory until lived. Spiritual law reveals its nature through experience quietly, naturally, without fanfare. When students came to me in fear, in sickness, in despair, I did not give them methods. I did not give them formulas. I did not tell them to change their thoughts or to fight their conditions. I asked them one question: are you willing to recognize God instead of the problem? And those who said yes, those who were willing to turn even slightly toward the presence, became witnesses to the hidden law of being. Let me share with you some demonstrations, not to astonish you, but to show that these principles operate universally, independent of time, culture, personality, or background. They reveal that what Jesus lived, what the mystics knew, what the infinite way teaches, is not philosophy, but spiritual fact. The mother who stopped trying to heal her child. A young mother brought her son to me. The boy had been sick for months. Doctors had done all they could. The mother herself had prayed, affirmed, begged, pleaded, and wept for healing. Nothing improved. She asked me, "What must I do now? What prayer must I say?" I said gently, "My dear, you must do nothing. You must stop trying." She looked startled. "Stop trying? But he needs healing." "Yes," I replied, "but your trying is based on the belief that he is separated from God. Stop believing there is something to correct." I asked her to sit in silence with me. No thought, no effort, no treatment, only recognition. God is the life of this child. God is the health of this child. God is the only presence here. And then we were still, Something soft filled the room, something no human word can describe. A peace that was not ours began to flow through consciousness. And when the mother opened her eyes, she said, "I feel as if a burden I never knew I was carrying has fallen away." The next day she wrote to me, "The fever broke in the night. He is eating. He is laughing. Something lifted." Beloved, what changed? Not the child, not the body, not the disease. The belief changed. The consciousness shifted. The illusion collapsed. Recognition, not treatment, had done its work. The businessman who could not escape fear. Another student came to me, successful, wealthy, respected, yet tormented by fear of loss, fear of losing his business, his investments, his security. The world saw him as prosperous. His soul felt imprisoned. He asked, "Joel, what affirmation can break my fear? What statement can give me courage?" And I told him, fear is not overcome. Fear is outshined. You cannot push darkness out of a room. You can only bring in light. We sat in silence, and after a few minutes I whispered, "Supply is not in your business. Supply is not in your accounts. Supply is not in the world. Supply is the nature of God, and God is your consciousness." He said nothing, but he began to breathe differently, longer, deeper, calmer. He said, "It feels as if the walls inside me are falling." Weeks later he returned. The strangest thing happened. My decisions became clearer. My anxiety dissolved. Problems that terrified me resolved themselves. I didn't change strategies. I changed my center. Nothing external had shifted. Yet everything external had shifted. How? Because consciousness is cause, and experience follows it like a shadow. The woman who thought her mind was too busy, one student came in tears, "Joel, I cannot meditate. I cannot quiet my mind. I cannot feel this presence you speak of." And I said, "My dear, you do not need a quiet mind. You need a willing heart." I asked her only to sit with me in silence. Her mind raced. Thoughts flew everywhere. She felt nothing. But after a few minutes, she let out a long sigh. She said, "There is something here, something I did not bring." I smiled. That is the presence. It does not require your mind to be quiet, only your surrender. Days later she said, "My entire home feels different. My relationships softened. My anxiety eased. I feel carried." She had not mastered meditation. She had not conquered the mind. She had not perfected practice. But she had touched even faintly the Christ within. And that is all it takes for the spiritual law to begin its quiet work. The man facing loss who turned within in the darkest hour. Finally, there was a man whose entire world crumbled in a single year. Health issues, financial collapse, a marriage ending. He said to me, "I have nothing left. What can God do now?" And I told him, this is the moment. When everything external collapses, the only thing remaining is the truth. He did not believe me, but he was willing to sit in silence day after day, sometimes in tears, sometimes numb. He entered the stillness, not to fix his life, not to rebuild what was lost, simply to be present with God. One night, he felt a profound shift, not external, but internal, a peace he could not explain, a sense that something greater than my circumstances is alive within me. Months passed, and without striving, his life reorganized, new work, restored health, new relationships, and above all, a depth of peace he had never known before the crisis. He said, "Losing everything showed me the only thing that cannot be lost." Beloved, this is the miracle. Not the restored finances, not the healed body, not the renewed path. The miracle is the consciousness revealed. These stories are not extraordinary, they are natural to spiritual law. They do not glorify me. They reveal the nature of God. They do not demonstrate a special gift. They demonstrate a universal principle. Wherever recognition occurs, healing occurs. Wherever the presence is realized, the illusion dissolves. Wherever God is acknowledged, the appearance of not God vanishes. These stories exist to show you what happened for them can happen for you. What happened through them can happen through you. What happened in their consciousness can unfold in yours. For the law is the same, the presence is the same, and the Christ within you is the same. Beloved, we have journeyed through principles, practice, and demonstration. And now you may ask the question, every sincere seeker eventually asks, if these miracles happened in biblical times, if they happened for the mystics, if they happened for Goldsmith students, why do they still happen now? Why do they work in our modern world with all its noise, complexity, and confusion? The answer is simple. The answer is profound. The answer is eternal. Because God has not changed, because consciousness has not changed, because the law of being has not changed. Time does not alter truth. Civilization does not improve or weaken God. Technology does not update the infinite. The principles that operated through Christ Jesus are the same principles that operated through Elijah, through Isaiah, through John, through every mystic, and through every earnest student today. Spiritual law is timeless because spirit is timeless. Let us look deeply, quietly, without rushing. The law of one has no expiration. There is only one presence, one power, one life, one being. This is not a doctrine. This is the nature of reality itself. The moment you acknowledge one, you dissolve the fear of two. The moment you acknowledge God as all, you dissolve the belief in anything else. The moment you recognize the presence, the appearance of absence must fade. The world changes, cultures change, political systems change, but the nature of God remains the same, and therefore the law of oneness functions with the same precision it always has. What Jesus revealed is not primitive. It is not ancient. It is not tied to history. It is eternal, cosmic, universal, and therefore it operates just as clearly today. The law of consciousness has never been broken. Every mystic discovered the same truth. Consciousness is the cause of experience. When fear is entertained, the world reflects fear. When lack is believed, the world reflects limitation. When divine presence is recognized, the world reflects harmony. This has nothing to do with age, culture, language, or tradition. It is the way reality functions, whether or not the mind understands it. Just as gravity existed before it was named, the law of consciousness is operative whether or not humanity recognizes it. You cannot escape it, you cannot break it, and you cannot bypass it. But you can learn to align with it, and that alignment is what the world calls miracle. The law of non-power is always active. Goldsmith taught a radical yet liberating truth. Nothing unlike God has power. Not disease, not circumstance, not loss, not human will, not fear, not evil. These appearances rise, but have no law to sustain them. They roar, but they cannot endure. They frighten, but they cannot act. This law, the law of non-power, is eternally functioning because only the infinite has true power. What is not God-powered is not power at all, it is only belief. And belief loses its force the moment recognition dawns. This principle worked 2,000 years ago. It worked in the deserts of ancient prophets. It worked in temple courtyards and in fishermen's boats. And it works today in crowded apartments, noisy cities, quiet homes, hospital rooms, office buildings, and anywhere a soul turns inward to the presence. The law does not need silence, it creates silence. The law does not need purity, it reveals purity. The law does not need understanding, it imparts understanding. The law of inner recognition is timeless. Every miracle, every single one, flows from recognition. Recognition is the spiritual seeing of reality despite the appearance. That which is recognized inwardly must appear outwardly, because consciousness is cause and form is effect. This is not metaphysics. This is not philosophy. This is spiritual law, and spiritual law is not outdated. It is not ancient. It is not from another era. When a student today realizes even briefly, God is the only life here, God is the only substance here, God is the only presence here, the atmosphere shifts. The illusion weakens. The truth reveals itself. Not because the person has spiritual skill, not because they have mastered technique, but because truth responds to recognition always. Now, as ever, the law of grace is perpetually unfolding, and perhaps the most beautiful truth is this: grace is the natural activity of God revealing itself. Grace operated through Jesus. Grace flowed through the disciples. Grace filled the early mystics, the medieval saints, the Eastern sages, and every sincere seeker in every age. Grace is not a privilege bestowed on a few. Grace is the effortless operation of God, ever present, ever unfolding, ever available wherever recognition is found. Grace does not weaken with modernity. Grace does not fade in a noisy world. Grace does not diminish as humanity becomes busy, distracted, or confused. Grace is not dependent upon the world. Grace is dependent upon God, and therefore grace is eternal, unchanging, unfailing. Why these principles work today? They work because spiritual law is not affected by time. They work because consciousness is not limited by culture. They work because reality does not evolve, it simply is. And so, beloved, understand this clearly. The miracles of the past were not the result of Jesus' extraordinary ability. They were the natural result of his extraordinary recognition, and that recognition is available to you. Right now, in this moment, in this breath, the presence that healed the sick, raised the dead, multiplied the loaves, opened the eyes of the blind, and stilled the storm, is the same presence you carry within you now. The law that operated then is operating now. The consciousness that produced miracles then can produce miracles now. The Christ that walked the earth then is the Christ consciousness unfolding in your awareness now. The presence that healed the sick, raised the dead, multiplied the loaves, opened the eyes of the blind, and stilled the storm, is the same presence you carry within you now. Miracles continue not because we pursue them, but because we recognize the source from which they flow. Not something you must become, not something you must earn, not something you must purify yourself for. It is what you already are behind the veil, beneath the appearance, within the silence. For all that we have spoken, the nothingness of error, the supremacy of consciousness, the silence in which truth reveals itself, the recognition that heals, the grace that unfolds, all of it rests upon one source, one life, one presence. In the clamor of the world, in the intensity of personal problems, in the pressure of modern life, you may be tempted to believe that there are many powers, many forces, many causes. But understand this in the deepest chamber of your soul. There is only God, and God is all. And this allness is your very being, not something you must become, not something you must earn, not something you must purify yourself for. It is what you already are behind the veil, beneath the appearance, within the silence. The entire purpose of the spiritual path is not to bring God into your life, but to reveal that your life is already within God. Not to attract the divine, but to awaken to the truth that you never left it. Every miracle is a reminder of this. Every healing is a whisper of this. Every moment of peace is a confirmation of this. Every glimpse of the inner presence is the Christ saying, I am here. I have always been here. Beloved, you are never alone. You have never been separate. You have never been without the fullness of God. It is only the noise of the mind that creates the illusion of distance. It is only fear that creates the illusion of two powers. It is only conditioning that conceals what has always been true. Every miracle is a reminder of this. Every healing is a whisper of this. Every moment of peace is a confirmation of this. Every glimpse of the inner presence is the Christ saying, I am here. I have always been here. And what do you see? What do you feel? What do you know? Beloved, you are never alone. You have never been separate. You have never been without the fullness of God. This is the truth Jesus knew. This is the truth the mystics lived. This is the truth Goldsmith spent his life revealing. And now, dear one, this truth is awakening in you. And what do you see? What do you feel? What do you know? But because the Christ within you is remembering itself, because the divine seed planted in your consciousness is beginning to open, because your soul has reached a maturity in which it can finally hear what has always been whispered. Be still and know that I am God. As you leave this teaching, do not leave the presence. Carry it gently, tenderly, silently within you. When challenges arise, pause. When fear stares, pause. When the world demands your attention, pause. Beloved, as we come to the close of this journey, let us return to the beginning, not the beginning of this message, not the beginning of these teachings, but the beginning of reality itself, not through the effort of your mind, not through the discipline of your will, not through the struggle to be spiritual, for you are not moving toward God. You are moving from God. You are not striving to reach the kingdom. You are living from it. And as this recognition deepens, the world around you begins to reflect the truth dawning within you. Peace where there was unrest, clarity where there was confusion, sufficiency where there was lack, harmony where there was discord. This is not the reward for your practice. It is the revelation of what has always been true. Beloved, your journey does not end here. This is the beginning of a deeper walk, a walk not with a distant God, but with the presence that is your very self. Return often to the silence. Return often to the inner sanctuary. Return often to the awareness of the One. For in that returning, you discover something astonishing. You were never away. You were never separate. You were never lost. The Christ within you, the divine I that Jesus lived, the presence that Goldsmith revealed, is the truth of your being. Walk in this awareness, live in this presence, rest in this silence, and you will find that every day reveals a new dimension of the infinite expressing itself through you. This is the fulfillment of all spiritual teaching. To know God as your own life and to live from that knowing. And so, beloved, we return to the one source, the source that is never absent, the source that is never distant, the source that is never silent, the source that is the life of your life and the breath of your breath. Rest now in the assurance that God is, and because God is, all is well.